All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to the January 22nd regular meeting of Kimberley City Council, which I would now like to bring to order here on the homelands of the Ktunaxa peoples. Maurice, do we have any late items this evening?
We have no late item, Mr. Mayor.
All right, hearing none, could I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Councillor Royer moves, Councillor McBain seconds. All those in favor? That motion is adopted. Okay, we have a couple of minutes to adopt. The first are the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on January the 8th. Councillor Roberts moves, Councillor McGuire seconds. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And finally, the minutes of the special meeting of council held on November the 6th, 2023. Mover, please. Councillor McBain, thank you. And Councillor Royer seconds. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Excellent. So we have a delegation this evening, Council. Nathan O'Reilly is here to talk about the 2023 Invasive Plant Management Program and with some recommendations for the coming year. Take it away, Nathan.
Resource Group. We are based out of Prince George, BC. I've been with the company for 12 years now, and I primarily have worked on invasive plant management and forestry operations throughout Ontario, New Brunswick, Yukon, and BC. So yeah, tonight I'll just do a quick presentation on our, similar to last year, where our invasive plant management program in the city of Kimberley in 2023. And we can just, yeah, next. Yeah, basically overview invasive plants. Any plant or species that's not native to BC whose introduction and spread has potential to pose undesirable detrimental impacts on people, animals, or ecosystems, commonly referred to as alien, non-native, exotic, or introduced plant species. Some characteristics are they produce many seeds, some plants up to 140,000 seeds per year per plant. Their seeds spread easily and effectively. They quickly establish and spread in open ground disturbed areas. That's ditch lines, gravel pits, backyards. They lack natural predators and diseases that keep them under control in their native locations. Next slide, please. Some control methods are prevention, not purchasing invasive plants from greenhouses. There is a few places in the East Kootenays where some places do sell invasive plants, so we're trying to get rid of those. Mechanical by hand pulling, digging, deadheading, or foraging. Cultural or competition. Once an area is disturbed, reseeding or replanting as quick as possible with native vegetation to prevent invasive species developing. Chemical, that's the application of herbicide. And biological, there are places in BC where we use certain bugs or beetles to attack different invasive plants throughout the province. Next slide, please. So inventory, summary and methods. So in 2023, we did 107 unique sites throughout the city. Infestations are considered at least 100 meters away from each other. So if we have a road where there's multiple sites, they have to be at least 100 meters away from each other. We did actually 9 less sites in 2022. A big reason for this is we strategically tried to avoid using glyphosate as much as possible. So this actually took a few sites off our work plan. Most, if not all, historical sites in 2022 were visited in 2023. We primarily use chemical, although we did do some deadheading and digging at a few select sites throughout the city. Mechanical treatments consisted of deadheading, cutting, and removing developed seed heads. The herbicide used this last year was VP 480 glyphosate in Clearview, although in 2023 we significantly reduced the use of glyphosate throughout the city. And we developed a new priority class system in our work plan that is kind of proposed by the East Kootenay Invasive Species Council, where We took all the invasive plants that we found throughout the city in previous years over the last 3-4 years, and we kind of created a priority system so we could focus on the areas we actually wanted to treat. Next slide, please. So it might be hard to see here. So EKISC is the East Kootenay Invasive Species Council. They're a great resource for outreach, education, annual plans. So we kind of went with their plan, and they break out the East Kootenays into multiple areas, invasive plant management areas. And we specifically chose the St. Mary's area because that kind of covers the whole Kimberley region. And the graphic on the left kind of lists all the invasive plants that's in the region in a priority system. So anything in red is provincial or a high priority. Anything in orange is kind of an annual control. It's suggested to treat those plants. And anything in yellow, green, and blue are kind of, they're either in containment, they're out of control, or not recommended to treat. So with that priority system on the right, we developed a kind of an Excel work plan where we broke out all the species found in the city, and we kind of color coded them and created a priority system so we could focus our approach in 2023 to what plants we actually want to target. Next slide, please. So the number one target in Kimberley is blueweed, Echium vulgare, I think it is. You'll probably see it all throughout the city. Blueweed is biannual plant, short-lived, perennial, growing 30 to 80 centimeters tall. It's stiff and rough, covered in hairs. Lower portion of the stalk has like purple blotches. It's actually a very pretty plant, but it's also very toxic to animals as well. Impacts economically, invades pastures and rangelands, replaces forage plants, and can create lots of economic loss, especially if it spreads into agricultural land. Ecological, competes with native plants. So once it establishes in a ditch line, a gravel pit, it essentially takes over in about a 2 to 3 year period. And then agriculture contains alkaloids, which can actually be toxic to horses and cattle when they ingest them. And each plant actually produces up to 2,800 seeds per plant. So one small patch can turn into a massive infestation in a 1 to 2 year period if left untouched. So next slide, please. This is kind of like a snapshot overview of all the priority invasive plant species we found in the city of Kimberley. And this is kind of a progressive chart that shows 2021 results, 2022, and 2023. Overall, it looks like in 2023, we inventoried 48.98 hectares of plants all throughout the city. It's actually a reduction from 2022 and 2021, mainly because we decided to focus more on sites that we could actually effectively treat with a 2-pass approach, as opposed to just kind of going to every single site on the work plan. A lot of these are like the highest priority plants in the city. And overall, you can see kind of a trend. Some plants have kind of remained neutral. Some have but most have decreased in size and distribution and density overall. So next slide, please. So a summary of our results is in total, we actually inventoried 78.61 hectares all throughout the city of all priority classes. So a lot of times when we go to a site, we're not just looking for a high priority, we're also surveying the low priority. It's good information and data to have to understand where the plants are moving, how fast they're spreading, how fast they're developing. In 2023, we did 48.98 hectares of high priority plants. This includes spotted knapweed, compared to 2022, where we inventoried and managed 62.21 hectares. So overall in 2023, we've seen actually a 23.8 decrease in plants that we treated last year. Next slide, please. So overall, the results for blueweed is the most prominent and concerning invasive plant in the city. In 2021, we did 107 sites. In 2022, we did 104 sites. And in 2023, we completed 95 sites. Overall, a lot of this was, as I mentioned kind of a little bit earlier, is we stayed away from the downtown core, and we stayed away from sites that were next to homeowners or where it'd be difficult to control. And we focused our efforts more on actual sites that we could actually effectively control. And this included like a 2-pass approach where we would visit the site maybe in May or June, wait 2 or 3 weeks, and then return to see if we missed any plants. So we're kind of more effectively monitoring the sites we already treated. So there was an overall decrease in 2023, but we feel like we managed the sites better than previous years. So next slide, please. I showed this last year in my presentation, but this is just a snapshot of the Forest Crown area. You can see it's just completely littered with blueweed. It's a very pretty plant, but it completely overtook all the ditch lines and the road access all the way through the community up there. Each plant can produce up to 2,800 seeds. In previous years, we never treated this area. It was kind of, we just never went up there. But in 2023, we actually did a full management regime, 2-pass approach in the whole area, which we feel like was very successful. But you can see how if one plant is missed, that could be 2,800 seeds spreading around that plant every year. So it was very important to go up there and actually have an effective control throughout the neighborhood. Next slide, please. I won't go too much into this. These are some of the other high priority plants that we went after. Spotted knapweed, scentless chamomile, and Dalmatian toadflax. They're pretty obvious and you can see them throughout the city. We generally try to stay away from spotted knapweed because once we look at the EatKiss plan, we realize it's kind of it's one of those plants that it's just everywhere in the East Kootenays. So why waste budget and manpower to go chase a plant that you can find in almost every ditch line? So we kind of focus those efforts more on blueweed. But overall, we did see a decrease of 7.85 hectares, mostly because we didn't manage it or didn't look for those sites. And same with scentless chamomile, kind of stayed the same, and Dalmatian toadflax actually decreased by more than a quarter of a hectare because we've actually been treating it for the last 3 or 4 years. So next slide, please. And then some other species that are listed on the EatKiss plan. Canada thistle is probably one of the most common invasive plants throughout Canada, always found in rangeland, pastures, ditch lines. Common tansy, that's a huge priority plant in northern BC. Horiolisum, which is a provincially listed plant. Hound's tongue, mountain bluet, and baby's breath. These are all very high priority plants, but you can see the overall trend is we were actually seeing a decrease in sizes of infestations. I think Horiolisum stayed at 0, which is great. We've seen no new infestations, and same with baby's breath, no new spotted infestation throughout the city. But for overall, we've seen a decrease in these plants that we've treated since the last 3 or 4 years. Next slide. So one of the biggest things is the most significant change during 2023 operations was the reduction in glyphosate used throughout the city. There's huge public backlash about this herbicide. Totally understandable. There's a lot of kind of different science online, a lot of different opinions. So we switched to a different herbicide, Clearview, which is primarily used on the road right-of-ways, open areas, and away from homeowners. This herbicide actually has more of a higher efficacy. It provides some residual control. It stays in the soil. It actually suppresses seed growth during the next season, whereas glyphosate is kind of a one-time kill. Once it's applied, it kills the plant, but it has no residual control, whereas Clearview actually can kind of 1 to 3 years kind of provide some control on seedlings so that when we go in to manage these plants, we can be more on top of them year after year and it suppresses seed growth. But overall, the use of switching from Clearview or from glyphosate to Clearview, we notice a huge difference in public opinion throughout the city, almost 0 complaints and higher efficacy rates across the board. The Forest Crown area was completely treated with a 2-pass approach last year. We treated the entire right-of-way all the way up into the middle of the neighborhood. Generally, homeowners were ecstatic, happy that we were there, that we were treating it. And throughout the season, we returned and monitored those sites several times, and we noticed a massive decrease in seed growth and mature plants by the end of the season. And the other thing of note is mechanical treatment is extremely time consuming. That requires our crew to sit there with shovels and garbage bags and essentially dig every single plant out manually. So by having a good summer of actual herbicide application, we've seen a huge increase in efficacy across the board with all the plants we've been treating. So next slide, please. Another quick overview shot of Forest Crown. This is from 2022. You can see it was just a sea of blue weed everywhere that just basically remained untouched for several years. So another challenge Spectrum came across was invasive plants located on private properties. We've noticed when we're doing like a lot of walking trails, right of ways near rivers, that there's a lot of backyards, homeowners with gardens that's almost encouraging invasive plant growth. So something that we propose to do in 2024 is create like a door knocker information landowner sheet, I guess, to just drop off homeowners as we see. And we've noticed in the other cities like Prince George, Prince Rupert, we've had great results with this, where we're not pointing fingers or targeting any homeowners. We're just letting them know that they have this invasive plant on their property. And if they would like treatment, they could always call us and we could arrange something to deal with the plants on their private properties. It's so successful in Prince Rupert that after a few years of doing this, we have a call sheet of almost 400 people yearly that people call in, and they can't wait for us to return every year. And after 10 years of working in Prince Rupert, we've probably reduced invasive plants in the city by 60% just by targeting homeowners. So something we really want to propose in 2024. And another thing is dealing with plants that grow along river systems, walking trails can be very difficult because of dog walkers, and we're not allowed to apply herbicide near running water. So we would like to maybe remove some of those sites from the work plan and focus more on community weed pulls in the future to actually bring people in and bring a whole crew of people and provide some information, outreach, and get people involved to help dig up the plants with us, and then effectively treating the sites, but reducing the amount of manpower that Spectrum requires to complete these sites throughout the city. Next slide, please. What I just mentioned, community weed pulls, they're very successful all over BC. We had kind of a rocky last few years trying to organize this, but Spectrum is very committed in 2024 to kind of pick a date, reach out to a bunch of organizations, and just create a community weed pull event where we can bring all walks of life there, educate, hand out merch to people, get to know some people, bring some coffee. And it always works out very well. If we can get 20, 30 people involved, as you can see in this photo, I think this is from Kamloops region. Just a few hours of work can eradicate seed spread that season in a massive field kind of thing. So that's something we're very committed to do in 2024. And as well, what I mentioned earlier, the landowner program, Spectrum will work on kind of creating an outreach program in 2024 to inform the public about the spread of invasive plants. This could also be in conjunction with the city, a few social media posts or something in the newspaper, on the radio. What I mentioned earlier about door knockers, just a simple information sheet that can be left in people's mailboxes, letting them know what plants on their property, what they can do to control it, and maybe the positive and negative effects of getting rid of this plant. As I mentioned earlier, too, many other communities in BC have tons of successes with a hotline phone number or an email that people can call into. And as I mentioned, like with Prince Rupert, almost on every year now, we have 300 plus people calling every season for us to come to their houses and deal with these plants. And what we would do too is we could create a kind of a reduced cost system where if they call us to treat the plants on their property, we can give them a very reduced rate to treat the plants on their property while we're already there. So next slide, please. General recommendations. So all sites that were managed in 2023 be revisited in 2024. The priority class system where high priority plants are prioritized over low priority continue to be implemented in 2024. We propose a budget increase of approximately 5 to 10 crew days, which will allow treatment within major problems outlined earlier. And development of the landowner outreach control program would greatly increase public awareness and really help control invasive plants on private property all throughout the city at a reduced cost. In conclusion, so overall, 2023 was deemed successful. Not all sites in the work plan were managed, but as I mentioned earlier, we avoided kind of sites where it was glyphosate use only or just mechanical, and just focus on sites where it could actually get some good results. The priority class system that was implemented allowed the crew to focus on invasive plants of concern, specifically blueweed. Overall reduction in glyphosate use in the city resulting in less public concern with higher efficacy rates. Infestations of blueweed are continuing to pop up around the city. Spectrum has expanded surveying measures to ensure we're catching all these infestations, making sure they're inventoried and managed, and addressing some of the challenges discussed will lead to the successful management of these invasive plants in the future, really. And here's another quick overview of Forest Crown. This is from 2022, but mid-July, early August, it's just a sea of blueweed everywhere. So, but yeah, that was it. Thank you very much. My name is Nathan O'Reilly, and I work with Spectrum, and we look forward to working with Kimberly in 2024.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the detailed presentation, Nathan. A lot of information contained there. Councillor Royer first.
Hi, Nathan. How are you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Good. I'm just letting you know about my background. I have a pesticide license, and I just have a general question about, the overall development and your management is great, but I think we're missing one very important detail that seems to recycle the weeds in general all over the city, is maybe contacting the developers of empty lots. I can think of two places, one in Marysville and the new subdivision in Forest Crown. Have you thought of contacting the people who are selling the lots?
We've never actually gone that route, but we do notice, like, anytime there's disturbed areas, that's where the plants kind of just invade and take over. So at this point, after a few years of management, we're kind of monitoring those areas. We know where the hot spots are, and year after year, we're just kind of monitoring, checking. But no, that is a good point. I should reach out to some of the developers and inform them, give them some information, what they can do to stop the spread of invasive plants while they're developing, really. So
Great. And just one more thing too. What I found in personal experience is, believe it or not, just weed whacking those things right down to the ground. You don't have to spray. You eliminate the seeding process before they actually start seeding, and it actually saves a lot of money on spraying. Would you agree with that? In that department, as long as you weed whack it before it goes to seed?
it works with some select plants. We have tried that method. A lot of times you'll see on the highways, they'll have the cutters on the side of the highways doing that to prevent the local spread. But at the end of the day, if the plant's already established and those seeds are in the ground, like, that could just be, it'll just slowly keep spreading and spreading. Even if we weed whack it ahead of time, and we have done weed whacking in the city of Kimberly, it's still not enough to actually eradicate the plant. It will still pop up. And if we miss one section or one portion, it'll still bloom, create another 2,800 seeds, and then it just kind of, the cycle just kind of keeps going, kind of thing. So
Makes total sense. Thanks, Nathan.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Councillor Royer. Okay, Nathan, thanks so much for the presentation. Somebody else? Oh, sorry, Woody. Go ahead, Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I found the part with the priorities very interesting, and I was just curious. I know you mentioned that 1 and 2 were kind of your priorities, but it seems like 99% of it were 3 or 4 as far as like hectares go. And I'm just curious how important it is to be treating those priority number 4 established species, and if we can maybe focus more of our effort just on the blueweed or on those eradication species. And also whether it's a real priority to be looking at in the number 3 containment, which is blue weed and orange chalkweed.
Yeah, maybe I kind of sped through the presentation, but we kind of stopped near where blue weed like containment is. We kind of work from that list up. So that's what in previous years, we kind of just created a baseline. We kind of went around the city, what's there, what's the priority. And then in 2023, we really focused with EKIS plan to, okay, these plants are a priority. These plants are already established. So we separated our work plan. So that's why overall you see the reduction in the areas we've treated, but overall we're actually revisiting those sites to ensure the plants are eradicated or controlled for that season. But that's something we're working on, especially in 2024, is to hone in on the highest priority plants where we can get the best bang for our buck, and to make sure that the plants are actually being controlled and monitored effectively instead of just kind of chasing all species throughout the city. Because, for instance, like spotted knapweed, we didn't really realize a few years ago, but it is completely out of control all throughout the city. And in previous years, we'd actually do treatment on that plant, but then we realized out of our X amount of days of management activities, we'd spend probably 25% chasing a plant that is just everywhere. So in 2024, we're really focusing specifically on blue weed and the upper higher priority plants to make sure that those are controlled first before we kind of go into spotted knapweed and kind of lower priority plants for sure.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Nathan. Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you again on this, no doubt.
Great, you too, and thanks a lot.
All right, next up, pardon me, we have the zoning amendment for 485 Ross Street, and the motion on the floor is the council authorize the issuance of the notice of proposed zoning amendment for bylaw 2757, City of Kimberley zoning bylaw 1850, in accordance with section 467 of the Local Government Act, which basically describes that notice of public hearing not be held. So we'll get Troy to, I know it was in the staff report basically, but we'll get you to explain exactly what this motion is first of all, and then we'll go to questions. Okay, Councillor McBain moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so this involves the property at 485 Ross Street, sorry. Reset here, 485 Ross Street. This is a long-standing non-conforming use. Property contains a single unit residence and a detached garage. Not exactly sure the timeline of when the property was zoned C3, but certainly for the life of the existing 1850 zoning bylaw. The current owner of the property bought it this way and is in the process of listing it for sale. And we've been getting quite a few inquiries from various potential purchasers, and the owner seller has chosen to move forward with a zoning amendment here. And so the zone that they're looking to rezone to is the DMU2 zone, the downtown mixed use zone. Some of council will recall when the DMU1 and DMU2 zones were created, in part for situations very similar to this kind of example, where we have an existing residential use happening on a commercially zoned property. The DMU2 zone includes a mix of both residential and commercial uses, and leans a little more to the residential side than the commercial side, and the DMU1 zone is a little bit more commercial than residential. But both of them have provisions to allow situations like this to continue until such time as the use of the property is changed by a future owner. And then they have a flexible range of residential or commercial options to propose and consider. Staff supports the proposed change. I think it matches well with a number of the objectives set out in the official community plan and the intended purpose of the DMU2 zone. I think if anyone's familiar with the site or has a look at the site, there's a number of challenges to that site that probably makes it not likely that we'll ever see a C3 automobile commercial use on that property, just given the constraints of access being at the junction to the Selkirk High School Road and just the fairly significant slope to the site there. So doesn't really lend itself well to that kind of automobile centric use. So we're recommending, because of the alignment with the official community plan, we're recommending that this is a good amendment to consider without going through the public hearing route.
Awesome. Thanks, Troy. Just before we go to Councillor McBain, just to clarify then. So, so notice would be given of no public hearing, feedback would come back, and then how long a period of time do we accept that feedback, and would first reading of the bylaw then happen at that point in time?
Yeah, so if council supports the recommendation, we will work this week to send out those notices, and that, as you said, explains that it's a notice of the proposed zoning amendment. If there's any comments that anybody wishes to make, they can submit those to us by email, and then we'll bring those back to a future council meeting with recommendations on whether to move forward. And that may include recommendation of first, second, and third reading. Given the proximity, it's right adjacent to the Highway 95A, so we'll have to await for approval as well from the Ministry of Transportation before the bylaw can be adopted. But so there'll be at least a couple more meetings before that zoning amendment can move forward. And just depending on, it's quite likely we'll have a report back at the next meeting, but if not, certainly the meeting after that.
Councillor McBain.
Yeah, I think just in the essence of time, I think this is a no-brainer. I mean, I don't know how the seller can even offload it the way it is right now. So to me, there's not a lot of debate here. This completely makes sense, and I think it's the right way to go.
Thanks, Councillor McBain. Go ahead, Troy.
If I may just comment a little further on that. I think it's definitely a potential hindrance to the sale of the property, but just to be clear, that there's nothing outright like preventing or prohibiting the sale to happen. It's just a matter of whether there's a buyer that's willing to move forward with the condition that it's in.
Just to clarify, I guess I meant just more availability of use. That was where I was going with that. So
yep.
Thanks, Troy.
Okay, cool. Council, further? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next up is the development permit application for 861 Deer Run Drive. Motion on the floor is the council authorize the corporate officer to issue notice of variance proposed at 861 Deer Run Drive. Yeah, so this is minimum yard. This is different. We're going to issue notice to neighbors under the existing process, correct? Yeah. Just to clarify, yeah.
Yeah, so this is for a development variance permit. So this would be a notice of intention to vary or approve the variance as requested.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Mover, please. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. Further comment? Go ahead, Councillor McBain.
Again, I think this is pretty straightforward. As long as, Troy, I guess I could ask you this. As long as this doesn't, prohibit or make challenges for city services with respect to fire and access and all that type of stuff, to me, this is pretty easy one.
We don't foresee any problems in that regard. This is a fairly straightforward example. Council may recall there's been numerous other variances considered on Deer Run Drive. A lot of those had to do more with side yard relaxation for retaining, but there is some significant slopes to deal with on this property. Of course, you're either the road is either on the uphill side of the lot or the downhill side. In this case, the lot is on the downhill side. I commend the applicant and Sarah Holden, our planner, that have been working on this. The original plans did have more significant number of variances proposed or required. And they've been working closely to reduce those and get it down to something that we think is reasonable and can be supported. There's a built-in relaxation in the general regulations of the Alpine bylaw, for example, like this, that it reduces the required front setback to 5 meters when there's a sloping site like this. And in this case, given the specific slope conditions on this site and the plan that the owners come up with, we think it does warrant consideration of the further relaxation down to a 4-meter front setback. And this will just really help with minimizing slope on the driveway and length of the driveway there without interfering with traffic circulation or access for emergency vehicles on the road. And will just help with kind of improving the layout of the site overall and kind of usability of the backyard down slope there.
Awesome. Thanks, Troy. We have a mover on this one? Yeah, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Looks like we have about 3 or 4 more lots that undoubtedly will be coming forward with similar requests. Interestingly, every one of those, even though it's on the same side of the road and you know, the slope is an issue, every one of them is a little bit unique, not quite like the other. So yeah, I expect we'll see more of this to come. Okay. Next up, we have the 2024 Community Project and Event Standing Grant Allocation Approval. The motion on the floor is that council approve the allocation of the 2024 grants in the amount of $128,473 as presented in the report. And further, the council approve, well, let's just stop with, we'll have to do those in two separate motions. So with the first one, Councillor McGuire moves, Councillor Royer seconds. Discussion. Pam, did you want to make any comment on this?
Thank you for voting. This is where it landed in conjunction with that standing grant. So, yeah, let me know.
Okay.
We'll let everybody know pretty much within the next few days.
Council, comments or questions for Pam? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Second part of this is the council approve the allocation of a standing grant to the Healthy Kimberley Food Recovery Depot in the amount of $14,010 as presented in the report. Councillor Royer moves, Councillor Dunneback seconds. Discussion. Comments? No. Council? Right, call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, before we move on, I do have actually a motion that I would like to put on the floor after having conversations with our communications manager and the keeper of the process. And that motion would be that we direct staff to conduct an assessment of our policy with respect to the community grants. It's with respect to the community grants, and come back to council with a report and recommendations at a future council meeting. We basically have 10 months before the next process comes through. Anyway, that would be the motion. I'll speak to it in a second. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Cairns, thank you. So basically, this has been in place for 2 or 3 years now. 4 years, 5. So at the time, we went into a fairly detailed process with a couple of councillors kind of doing the investigation, coming back to council with recommendations, and it's how we ended up with what we have in place right now. It has been in place for a while without any review, and I think, and speaking for certainly the last 3 councils that I've been part of, we're seeing a shift in requests in terms of what is being requested, and we're starting to get, as we saw with Healthy Kimberley, requests for standing grants. And I know from conversations that have been happening, we're going to get more requests for standing grants. And we need to review this policy to make sure that we cover and as a council are committed to what it is we're trying to see that money used for. So it's just prudent to be doing an assessment at this point. And that's the reason for the for the motion. Just before questions, Pam, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. We did just do a revision, a very small revision, and that was to take out the in-kind grants and make everything a cash grant. But through this granting process, I'm certainly seeing there's a lot of issues where it's not very clear to applicants, it's not very clear to staff, and that type of thing. So we've been working with that same policy that's been in place since I've been here. So, I mean, I think the intention is to take that policy and completely break it down and kind of work on, I've got a little bit of a list of about 6 things. Just look at funding amounts and allowable expenses. Reiterate eligible applicants, which has been a bit of an issue this year. Provide clarity around the different grants available. There's many different grants listed, different types of grants and projects, events, standing, discretionary. Just provide clarity around what do all those things mean. We'd also like to streamline the voting process and make it more efficient for you as council. And this would, of course, be done over a series of meetings or a couple of meetings where we could all vote and you could decide how you want this to look going forward before we bring that final policy back before the 2025 round.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Pam. Councillor McGuire.
I think this is a great opportunity to take a look, and it could even be of benefit to have a little bit more. I mean, we could even break that money into different streams that prioritize different priorities of City Council. So I'm excited for the conversation. Is essentially what I'm saying.
Thanks for that, Councillor McGuire. Further, Councillor McBain.
No, just make, no, it's all good. My only concern would just be, staff time and Pam, how much it would put on you. That's all. And as long as, you and Jim have worked that out, I'm fine with it. And I just wanted to give it my support. So that was my only concern.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. I think it's long overdue that we do a bit of an overhaul of this policy. And I think in addition to looking at the things that have been mentioned, I mean, the dollar amount itself, it's, I think I may have mentioned last meeting or the meeting before, we have neighboring communities, not much different in size to us, that their entire discretionary grant program is $15,000, and ours is in the $130,000 range. So it is quite generous. So maybe taking a look at that and what some other communities are doing would be helpful for comparison purposes as well.
Thanks for those comments, Jim. All right, last call. Call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Pardon me, that motion is carried. Thanks for the support on that, Council. I think it'll be a very positive move. Okay, next up, we have the drive-through and gas station policy and regulatory considerations. The motion on the floor is that Council direct staff to undertake a community engagement process to help guide drive-through and gas station policy and zoning amendments for future Council consideration. Mover, please. Councillor McGuire moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. You want to lead off discussion, Troy? Give us the Polls Notes version.
Yes, yes, I will. Thank you very much. Yeah, so council recall, I guess this report's responding to direction from the August 21st council meeting, and building on previous discussions amongst council and within the community around previous OCP and zoning amendment application down in Marysville, where certainly generated a significant interest and feedback from the community surrounding drive-through uses and gas station. And what I think what that process really helped to identify was that there's a bit of a policy gap or a guidance gap and around these particular land uses. We anticipate that we'll see similar or more of these proposals in the future, and staff is recommending that it'd be worth our while to seek some clarification with regard to these issues. We've recommended a couple of, or a recommended approach that some additional community engagement should happen on this, just to help that process along. Of course, there is the alternatives identified there of a council just giving direction to start working on some amendments with what we've called either the kind of prohibit or mostly prohibit, and then or the allow, but put some restrictions or some regulation around that. So a couple options there that have been identified. There's also, I guess, probably some other hybrid options of combining those if there's interest there. I think that Ariane has done an excellent job here of laying out the issue and the context here in much greater detail than I have time to get into right now. But so hopefully all the councils had a good review of that report and the context there. And certainly let me know if there's questions or comments on any part of that.
All right, thank you, Troy. Councillor McBain.
Yeah, thanks. This was a lot to chew on, but I really appreciate it. My only comment, I guess, would this just be to council in general, is just be to consider. I think in general, I'm for the direction that we're going, but I would like to at least keep that option like allow but restrict. And I'll just give an example just for people to chew on. It's not, we don't have it right now, but I could just, if there was something like a new pharmacy opened up with options for seniors to be able to drive through during cold months, hot months, not get out of their vehicles, there are uses besides fast food and coffee and other things like that could be that somebody could come here to propose that may be not a bad idea. So I think as long as you just keep a window open for those types of things, I'm totally cool with it. I mean, I think we're all in favor of kind of moving away from drive-throughs, but you never know what the situation may be that may make sense. And then given the fact that we are moving away from combustible like ICE vehicles, it's always just good to keep a window open. And that's my only thing.
Thanks, Councillor McBain. Councillor Roberts.
Similar to Jason, I feel the same way about it. Whenever somebody says we're not going to allow that, it feels to me like the hard hammer of the law somehow or other. And I feel as though restrictions with cause and stuff, I can live with that. When we were, it's a long ago story now, but the piece that is the parking lot, we were going to build a building there. And part of that was the city was going to be changing the way the corner worked, and we were going to have a drive-through ATM. So there was banking potential there where people could drive in the front, come out the back alley, and so on. So there's potential for things except for food and gasoline. And I think we need to not lose sight of that. I'm not sure how that'll transpire, but let's not just cut off our nose to spite our face,
Thank you for that, Councillor Roberts. Further? I just have a couple of comments. So with respect to more is always good. It means people are interested in investing in the community. And I completely agree that applications on a case-by-case basis allow flexibility. There's also really the principle that we have as a council that we attempt not to encumber future councils with decisions that we're making, where they may in fact be prohibited from taking a step back for the unforeseen. So it's always better to be able to approve going forward as much as it is trying to undo something that was done by a previous council. The other comment, I really appreciate, Troy, the options as they were laid out in the report. I think that there is overall a balance of considerations. We've talked about a couple here today, but there is also consideration based on our proximity to Cranbrook that is unique to an awful lot of communities. So, I mean, we celebrate the fact that we don't have big box stores, that Cranbrook has the big box stores, and we fully encourage people to head to Cranbrook for the big box stores. Realistically, we're never going to have those here anyway because of the proximity to Cranbrook, but I don't think we can ignore the fact that we have a lot of traffic that goes back and forth in that retail context. So similarly, the major fast service restaurants are located in Cranbrook. It's exactly the same 60-kilometer round trip as it is for any other trip going to Cranbrook. And unlike the big box stores, there's a business case for fast food, or not fast food, for fast service restaurants, which in the jargon of the industry, FSRs is basically what they're called. The focal point we've had has to do with drive-throughs and emissions, basically idling emissions as we go through. But there is data that we can mine that helps us make a much broader informed decision on when it may be good for us to consider whatever an opportunity might be, FSR or otherwise. And so, for example, in the month of January 2022, I was able to secure some data from Moneris that talked about the point of sale transactions that they had for that 1 month and this was January of 2022 is the month that was chosen. We can get lots more data if we're prepared to pay for it, but this was the poor man's way of finding out a test, kind of on a single month. Now, in that sample month, Moneris, which has about 30 to 35% of the market, so this is only their data, showed 2,000 unique cards representing just under 4,000 transactions at Moneris POS in Cranbrook that were owned by people that lived in Kimberley. They're a payment processor. And the average transaction value for that month was $21. So when we take a look at what the average meal costs in a restaurant, like a non-fast service restaurant, the majority of those 4,000 transactions in that 1 month would be attributed to what we call fast service locations. Now, what's important about that is that the average vehicle emits about 12,000 grams of CO2 on a 60-kilometer round trip. On a 10-minute idle through the drive-through, beg your pardon, it's roughly 600 grams. And so we need to take into account all of this data in how and what we are trying to achieve. The data is available. We just have to make sure that we want it and can find it. And I trust staff and their ability to be able to suss all of that out. Councillor McGuire, go ahead.
Yeah, just in response to the emissions part, the emissions of an idling vehicle are thousands, I don't know if it's thousands of times, but significantly higher than a vehicle in motion. And that's just due to NOxes and different pollutants that are released. And that's why it's actually recommended to idle as little as possible, even in winter months. New vehicles are quite good at warming up quickly. And the other thing I wanted to mention or ask actually was just around this public engagement process. What does that look like? And if we don't look at this now, would it be looked at within an OCP review in the near future? I'm just trying to gain more insight into the situation we're in and what we're proposing.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent questions. Don't have a very clear answer, I guess, in terms of exactly what that looks like. We're very much interested in what council had to say this evening in response to the report and the recommendation. I think, though, in general, although we want to allow for substantial and significant engagement from the community, we also want to recognize is that there's other initiatives underway and other projects underway. So want to kind of balance that, keep it fairly light, but make sure we're keeping it open and accessible to as many people as possible. And then the idea would be to report back to council and with what we've heard and maybe put a little bit more, a little bit more work into some of the options and also based on some of the feedback that we're getting here tonight as well. So.
All right. Thank you, Troy. Councillor Dunneback.
I heard a couple keywords there that I think is great moving forward, like for accessible and options. So we can bring more to the town. Well, we can focus on what we need, and if there are options for, like you say, a drive-through pharmacy or something like that, it's not just a hard no. If we can make the community better with it and safer, I think it's definitely something that should be looked at, and to have that kind of opportunity, I think is great. Keep a bit of a fire stoked anyways.
Thank you, Councillor Dunneback. Okay, last comment to Councillor McBain.
Yeah, I just want us to keep focused. I mean, we can get in bun fights over, emissions and things like that. Specifically, if we keep the options open, that's when we can have that type of debate. So I just want to keep our eyes on what the purpose of this is to be able to allow that flexibility.
Thank you. Yep, thank you for that. Okay, last comment to Councillor Cairns.
Thanks. Thanks for the excellent report. And I just, in terms of bringing in other types of drive-throughs that aren't for fast food, but do provide for, for more accessibility. When I think about, did a quick Google search online, there's 27 municipalities that have removed drive-throughs from their permitted zoning. And due to air pollution, emissions, land use, health, community character, aesthetics, traffic, reduced walkability. So lots of different reasons. So when it's removed from your zone, you can certainly amend the zoning, right? So it's when we do have specific uses that make a lot of sense, we can also entertain those. And just in terms of, I thought the summary paragraph from the report was really excellent, and just that we do need to provide clear guidance for developers so that there's an understanding of the direction that we're going in, and our community definitely told us that as well. And so, yeah, just the final statement in the report says the intent of creating policies and regulations for drive-throughs and gas stations is not to stifle growth, but provide clear direction to ensure development aligns with community values and expectations. OCPs and zoning bylaws are living documents intended to be periodically reviewed to ensure they're serving their intended purpose. This is an opportunity to adjust the city policies and regulations to provide clearer direction to the community and investors. So that would also include, business retention, existing investors, and while supporting climate action and community health. So I think it's a really important piece, and it's an important opportunity. And I would be in support of the recommended option.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Councillor Cairns. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. All right, next up, we have the fourth quarter report from Animal Control and Bylaw Enforcement. The motion on the floor is that we receive the report. Councillor Royer moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. Thank you, Councillor McGuire. I don't see Sean here tonight. Who's going to bear the brunt of the questions, Maurice?
I don't know if I can bear the brunt of question. Sean was traveling for training tonight, so I couldn't attend the meeting. It's pretty much business as usual. We have seen the decrease in call for service, but definitely I think it's due to a lot of proactive actions from the bylaw enforcement officer. And we've had a lot of success in court with getting tickets paid and dispute confirmed by the judge in favor of the city. So that we feel pretty solid on our new court process related to mostly parking tickets, but we're
as Sean is getting more confidence in his presentation in court, like we're adding other tickets related to animal control and things like that.
All right, awesome. Council, any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Royer.
Really short and sweet. Where's the money go when we collect from the tickets?
It goes in a GL for like to support the city in general. I guess it's kind of a
General revenue.
That's correct. Yeah, general revenue.
So I noticed that about half of the streets and traffic activity was initiated by the bylaw officer, which is interesting. So this last quarter has been a fairly busy time out on the streets. Is there something?
definitely. So usually in the fall, there's a big blitz to get the trailers off the street. So that's
Okay, that was-
the major part. Yeah.
okay.
And also a lot of actions related to angle parking. But it's definitely, we've also, something we did this year is we kind of modify his schedule. So he is working some Saturdays and he's also working some hockey nights. And so, and with that, we've been trying to educate people on ways to park because we had a lot of people parking in crosswalks and things like
By the arena.
yeah. Yeah, and he's definitely done blitz around the schools for the same thing, parents parking on the crosswalks.
All right, cool. Thank you. Good job.
Yeah. So
Council, anything further? Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, next up, we have the check run in the order of $680,303 to be approved as paid. Councillor Roberts moves, and I see your hand, Councillor Cairns. Thank you. Any non-routines that anybody noticed and are curious about? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, we have a couple of items of correspondence. Could I have a mover to receive? Councillor Royer, thank you. And Councillor McBain seconds. Any comments?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, is the first one really an action item? I mean, it just seems like it's kind of a general, kind of a rhetorical question about, where we're at. I mean, I guess we could talk about, but it doesn't really seem like an action item.
Well, I think that one meeting ago, maybe 2 meetings ago, we authorized the consulting report on kind of our state of water, into the future, along with potential plan Bs should something catastrophic happen. And I think that pretty much covers what was mentioned in the letter.
I was just questioning.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm with you. I think that was somewhat rhetorical. All right, call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. All right, so that's it for the regular agenda. We do have actually several items in close tonight, but before we get to that, we'll open up for members of the public to call if there are any questions regarding anything that was contained in the agenda this evening. That number to call is 800-741-7180. And when prompted, the meeting number is 270-680-4275. And while we are waiting to see if anybody has any questions, we'll do a quick around the table. Councillor Royer, go ahead.
Start with me. All right. Well,
I try and mix it up.
that's good.
Your turn.
You bet. So I'm happy to report that the accessibility advisory committee is going to start finally next week. We have our committee members and we're finally going to get that started. So I'm very happy to announce that. And we're going to go forward and I'll be happy to chair the first meeting and report to council on what's been happening with that. So that's number one. And last week I survived a catastrophic bobcat issue at work, but I survived and say to everybody in Kimberley with my services. Leave it at that.
So is that council business or community business?
Both.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Kevin?
Enjoying the snow with my family. Yeah. Made a short trip to Calgary. Nothing else to report, I guess.
Councillor McBain?
Nothing official to report. Just happy to see things running very smoothly up at KA, up at the ski resort after a pretty slow start. So that's just really encouraging, just given the way things started. So nothing official to report though.
Great, thank you. Councillor McGuire?
Yeah, I had a chamber meeting, and there was nothing major there to report. And I also attended the small scale housing event that was put on by the city, and it was informative. New regulations coming from the province that will impact all zones in BC. So it's all residential zones, that is. So it's pretty exciting to see the province making moves on alleviating some of that pressure in our housing market, and also interesting to see some of the ideas that are coming and the information being presented to contractors, developers, and finance folks within our community.
Thanks for that, Woody. Sue?
Thanks. So on Thursday is the Nature Park Society AGM, and everybody is invited and encouraged to attend, and it will be lots of food, drink, and guest speaker on key biodiversity areas. And then that is at the Elks Club, 7 p.m. And then coming up on Friday morning is that the United Way and Summit Community Services Better at Home program for seniors consultation. And so the Better at Home program provides non-medical supports to older adults so they may continue to stay in their homes. So I'm going to go and participate at that. And then the other item was the last week's Gentle Density Housing Accelerator program. And kudos to Troy and the planning team. It was clearly really well appreciated by all the industry experts that attended, and great discussion amongst builders, financiers, developers, realtors with the city planning team. And it really brought it made it really clear how well ahead of the curve Kimberley is due to the zoning that provides for the diversification of housing to bring in more dwelling units beyond single family homes. So well done. It was really, really great. I was sitting with a couple of people who were just going, Kimberley gets it. And as builders, home builders, they were just really appreciating it. They said other jurisdictions they're having a lot of struggle with, but they really enjoy working with Kimberley. So yeah, thought that was really great to hear.
Kind words. It's awesome. Sandra?
Thank you. A couple of interesting things. Down by where I live, we were privy to the development of a huge building in 4 days as they dropped all those pieces of building together and pinned it all together in middle of the ice and snow and rain and cold. And there it is, sitting there in all its glory. It's pretty amazing. Looking forward to seeing it all finished. And the second thing I want to note further to what you had to say, I was in a different environment where there was an engineer speaking, and he was talking about the piece of the work that he does with plans and planning to reach the certain levels of step code. And he, once again, also was really excited about the fact that the city of Kimberley has chosen to be very affirmative with their step code. And he said, from my perspective, it's become a point of pride by the construction builders who can build the tightest house. So everybody's like getting one up on each other, trying to make a better job of it. So I thought that was kind of a neat way of putting it, to see that they are buying into it. They see the value in it down the road for their buyers, and that we should create a reputation by virtue of their work. That's awesome.
That's awesome. It's a testament that you don't have to mandate it. It still happens. Yeah, cool. Okay, do we have any callers? Nope.
Caller, Mr. Mayor?
All right, hearing none, I'm not gonna go through well, I will make one comment. That was that, a lot of last week was taken up with, CAO candidate interviews, for which council would get briefed in our in-camera meeting. Always good to go through these exercises, and it gives us a window into what's happening in many other communities as well. Again, a source of pride on what we're doing. So with that, could I have a mover to go in camera? Councillor Cairns moves and Councillor Royer seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right. 2-minute warning.
No, because the road is closed.